Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's leadership meeting. My name is Melissa Llewellyn, and it's my honor to chair today's program as your moderator. Today is a special monthly meeting of the CEO Club, the Women's Leaders Association, and several other leadership groups. We have an extraordinary guest today, Devin Wenig, former CEO of eBay and the director at General Motors, and we'll be discussing best practices in the creation of technology advances and what it means to you. Cultivating your leadership potential, creating diversity and excellence in the technology field. We will also turn to the presentation in just a moment, but first I wanted to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently on mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for our other participants. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please visit www.ceoclub.org and click the questions button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and that'll submit a question to us. We'll hold the questions until the end, but please feel free to ask a question at any time during the chat today. With that, let's get started. We're going to be talking about diversity in the advancement of technology by Devin Wenig. He's the former CEO in eBay and director at General Motors. Devin Wenig, through his tenure at eBay, successfully spun off PayPal, which significantly evolved eBay's product experience. Before eBay, Wenig spent 18 years at the global technology and media company Thomson Reuters, where he also served as CEO. Wenig currently serves on the board of directors at General Motors and on the advisory board of Salesforce. Wenig is focused extensively on empowering women, the LGBTQ community, and minorities in the technology field. In 2019, Wenig was ranked in Forbes' list of 100 most innovative leaders. Welcome, Devin, and I'm going to go ahead and get you pinned here, and we'll go ahead and get started with our chat today. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Melissa. It's good to be here. It's an honor to be invited.
Yes, thank you so much. And I know that technology in this day and age is advancing so rapidly and so fast that I am so excited to pick your brain today on technology and what's coming up in the future.
Well, we'll see. I'm happy to have the conversation. Let's hope the technology in terms of our Zoom call holds up well. Let's there and we'll see where we go from there.
That's right. Well, I know with today, everyone has this work at home, remote society, and technology is a big part of our life, which is why we're doing Zoom through everyone. And we actually have so many attendees that are able to come from all over the world and watch these summits, which that's what the technology does for today's society. But I wanted to go ahead and dive into our first question, which is about your leadership style. I know that you have been CEO and a leader for many, many years, and you started at a very, very young age. What approach have you adopted in your leadership style? And what has worked over your career and what hasn't worked?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a hard question, in part because one of the things that I think is so important to convey to people is that they have to do it their way. They can't do it my way, and they can't do it anybody else's way. For me, I think, it's a little hard to be introspective over your career, but I think that the people that have worked for me would say that there are two things that I strive to be and have always tried. And that is, the first is authenticity, and the second is curious. And even though those can be buzzwords, they're deeply personal to me, and I find that they've worked for me. Authenticity is the one thing that I think everyone should apply because it means everyone will be different. Mm-hmm. I've seen so many leaders in my career who stalled because as they took on more seniority and as they took on more responsibility, they stopped being the person that I knew they were before they got that expanded role. They almost started playing a role. They started using different language. They started making decisions differently. Obviously, as you grow, you evolve. So the point is to evolve, but always be true to yourself. For me, I speak really plainly. I hate business speak. I recommend that people don't read business books because most of them are wastes of time. I tell people what I think, and I always told my organizations what I think, even when it's not great. And, I speak plainly and bluntly sometimes, and I communicate a lot because I want people to know what's on my mind. That's who I am. I grew up in New York. That's the way I learned to communicate. I moved to Silicon Valley 10 years ago, and that degree of restlessness and that degree of openness is who I am. I'm not saying that's the right thing for everybody. I think we'll talk a bit more later about diversity, but the point of diversity is that there are a lot of different ways to do it. There are people who are great leaders who are very shy, and there are people that are great leaders that are very boisterous. There are people that are introverts and extroverts. There are people of all different types that can be great leaders. But I think the first thing is, whatever your style is, don't lose that style as your career grows. The second thing for me, and it's really the reason that I moved to Silicon Valley and have been in the technology industry my whole life, is I'm intensely curious about what's going on in the world. It's so exciting and confusing and frustrating and all of that. But what I realized is my first instinct is not to be dismissive of things, even crazy things that are happening in the world. It's not to be skeptical, even though there is a role for skepticism. My first instinct is to learn more, is to be excited and learn more, and then potentially be skeptical. But my first instinct is not to be judgmental or dismissive of things. And I realized that, to me, culturally, I felt, it's a bit stereotypical, but I felt like New York at the time when I left was more of a management culture that was a bit more skeptical of the world. And at least 10 years ago, Silicon Valley was a bit of the art of the possible. There were dreamers and builders, and for me, that was exciting. And I felt like that was me as well. So, that degree of curiosity, I think, is super important as well, right? It can apply along a number of different axes. It doesn't only apply to technology. It can apply to any business, any industry. Frankly, I think it's a great life lesson. It's so easy. And there's a lot in the world that's heavy these days. I mean, it's not an easy time, right? You wake up in the morning, the news is bombarding you. We go straight out of a pandemic to a war. It's easy to get down about things. But, I would urge people to stay optimistic and stay open-minded and stay curious and learn. And there are many things that might seem crazy at first that turn out to be amazing.
That is so true, everything that you said. And I feel like you moving from New York and moving to Silicon Valley, and able to get into the tech world where everything is so adaptive and changing. Do you feel like that kind of pushed yourself a little bit to get outside of the world that you knew in New York City?
Well, yeah. And I felt like my tribe was here in some ways,
Yeah.
I felt like I was a little bit crazy, like a lot of people are here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very product centric, and I loved technology, and I was excited by it. So I felt more comfortable there. I still love New York for many, many reasons, but professionally, to me, I felt more comfortable there. And I think, pushing yourself as your career grows, whatever stage your career is at, taking some risks and being uncomfortable sometimes is really a great thing. I've seen so many people that get in their own head about that stuff, and you almost never hear of a case of somebody going for it in that way and it ends up going badly. I mean, the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work, and then you go back and you do the old thing. I mean, that's almost always the case. So it's the step not taken much worse than the risk taken.
Yes, that is, I mean, you are just saying everything so perfectly. Like, that's exactly how I feel. That's how we feel in the office. Just growth and learning just accelerates your career and your personal life as well. And that's what, our purpose is here. Now, I know that you, in the world of technology, our advancements are just coming around the corner so fast. And speaking of advancements, the web, if we can talk about the web a little bit, the web is transitioning now from 2.0 to 3.0. And I know 2.0 is the version that we're all familiar with. But the 3.0, the new version that's coming out, what is that going to look like in our society? And what's the biggest impact that it's going to have?
Yeah, so, this is a very important but a difficult conversation, and I'll try to make it very simple in my style of no business speak. I've spent a lot of my life working in the internet. When I was at Thomson Reuters, we built a consumer internet business. Obviously, eBay was a pioneer of the internet that we know today. I look back at, let's call it 1995, 1996, and there was the first enormous consumer technology shift. We moved from the first web, which nobody even remembers anymore, which was kind of like publish and subscribe to text. It was amazing, but people forget their dial-up modems and their badly loading news articles and all of that. But that was the internet in its first instance. And then around that time in the late 90s, something changed and we moved to what people sometimes call Web 2.0. And that was the great centralization of platforms and an internet where you contribute as well as read, right? That was the beginning of social media. That was the beginning of e-commerce. That was the beginning of search. And we all know that the great companies that were created in that moment. The reason I think this matters, and I'll get to Web3 in a second, is that anytime these enormous tectonic shifts happen in technology, it creates incredible disruption and incredible opportunity. Mm-hmm. There was an entire generation of businesses that went out of business within a year or two back in the late 90s, early 2000s, because of this move that happened on the internet. There were also incredible companies created, incredible careers created. It was, this time where you go through long periods of time where things are relatively stable, and then an earthquake occurs. Yeah. And that was the first one. And I think we're at the verge of another one right now. So Web3 is sort of one of these things that people put into that bucket what they want. People use it in different ways. But I think of it simply as the internet is being rebuilt along two different axes. One is a much richer experience, virtual and augmented reality. Some call that the metaverse. Mm-hmm. And it's also being rebuilt along a path to try to decentralize it, to try to move privacy, security, data back from the center where these big companies have control of it to the edge where individuals will. And that really is the blockchain and what many people see as cryptocurrency today. Those two things together make up what very well might be a different internet a year or two from now than we have today.
I know there's so many changes that is about to come out that we're going to see, especially in the next few years. And speaking of the metaverse and going into the Web 3.0, technology is enabling the creation of a single global online marketplace that you were just speaking about. So with many companies creating their own version of the metaverse, how is this going to impact the future of e-commerce?
Well, I think it has potential to upend e-commerce again.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I would say is, back to the point of curiosity, it's very easy as a first instinct to be skeptical of all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really, are we going to live in some weird virtual world? I don't want that world. Like, I like the real world. And crypto, isn't that for like 21-year-old kids in their basement speculating and trading Bitcoin? It's super easy to be dismissive of all of it. But I think if people take one thing away from it, it's that they shouldn't be, because there are a lot of flaky things that might be applications, but what's happening underneath that is important. Just like it was in 1995, 1996, there were crazy websites, ridiculous business models, stupid promotion, overhype, all of that. But what was happening underneath was that there was a platform being built that was incredibly important that would end up changing the lives of 7 billion people on the planet. I think that's what's happening again, is that there's lots of stuff that is kind of wacky right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But underneath that, this idea that we're going to have a richer digital experience, this idea that there is a brilliant solution using cryptography to move data and privacy away from big companies where people are very nervous about the power and control they have, back to individuals. I don't think there's any putting that horse back in the barn. I think that's going to happen. And because of that, one of the things that I would do is I wouldn't be cynical about experimenting with all of it. I've seen big companies, and when they put their cynicism aside and they play with those things, a lot of times they'll fail, but they learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And they may fail at 2, 3 projects, but then they're ready for the 4th that works. And I think adopting yourself to this world that's coming is really important. You asked about e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce already, it's extraordinary the degree to which it's changed. And the pandemic moved us 5 years into the future almost instantly. Mm. So, historically, when I left eBay, the global penetration rate of e-commerce was about 16%. So, 16% of shopping happened online globally, and the rest of it was still physical and in stores. That number is now about 33%. Mm-hmm. And it'll be over 50 in a few years. It's remarkable what's happened. In this new world, I think you'll just see richer shopping experiences. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. Some of the things that have been the slowest to really adopt to online are things where you just still have a much better in-person experience, like a high-end fashion boutique. It's very hard still to touch and feel fabric or to understand fit online. So commodity items in fashion sell very well, but more luxury items, branded items, things that they sell, but it's still hard. Returns are a big part of it. Mm-hmm. In this world coming, I can absolutely see a world where the barriers start to come down even on those axes, and people feel much more comfortable buying anything that they do in the real world online.
Well, I know that I've already seen where you can actually create an avatar that is shaped exactly like you and try on clothes in the metaverse and see exactly how it fits on you, exactly what it's going to look like. You can try on shoes, so the future is just so impressive, where we're going to take all of this, I feel like.
Yeah. And look, I think it's easy to have a very negative view of all that, saying like, I don't want to be sitting on a couch my life plugged in and not go outside and play with my kids in the park. But that's not, people won't allow that future. Facebook Meta doesn't get to decide what everybody does in their life. People get to decide what they do in their life. And I don't believe that we will or should or are going to have this dystopian future. I think it's exciting. I think that people will have the lives they have today, but we'll continue to see rich experiences. I mean, look at the pandemic. Thank God for technology. I mean, can you imagine where the world would be if everyone was locked up in their house with no ability to connect at all? It was hard enough as it is. So I tend to be a technology optimist. That doesn't mean there are not problems, but I'm excited about that future.
Well, I know I have kids, and I'm sure a lot of viewers that are watching have young kids. And technology companies are, do you feel like the technology companies are priming our youth with programs such as Roblox or Fortnite in order to prepare future generations to be kind of immersed in the metaverse or be a little bit more open to that technology than older generations?
I personally, I think there are a couple of things in your question. The first is that I think kids, and it's always been the case, are just so much more excited and receptive to new technology. I don't think that companies in particular are priming them. I think that they're there, right? They were the first ones to adopt video game technologies. They were the first ones to adopt AI. They were the first ones to adopt smart personal devices. Kids are they are extremely resilient, and they move very fast in a technology world. So I think that has always been the case, right? Like it's been the case for a long period of time. I do think, though, that companies have a responsibility around our kids, and that's a whole other conversation, right? I don't at all want to come across as I am a technology optimist, but I'm also a technology realist. There's some very bad things that have happened in society. It's absolutely a viable argument to say that has social media been a net positive or a net negative? We can spend another 5 hours on that and the solutions. We won't do that. But I do think I don't want this optimism about the future and the fact that kids are early adopters to abstract the responsibility that leaders and companies have for being good citizens and protecting kids and not dragging them into a future they don't want to be in.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And speaking of, I know there's so many people that have questions about the metaverse and where it's going and Web 3.0. And there's so much, in the news about people purchasing land for millions of dollars in the metaverse. And I've always just been so confused by that. Can you explain a little bit about, why people and why it's important to buy land in the metaverse and how that works across multiple?
I don't know if it's important to buy land in the metaverse. Okay. That very well may turn out to be one of these things that we look back on and say, boy, that's stupid, wasn't it? But I think what it is if you think about the internet today, it's a flat 2D representation of the world, right? Mm-hmm. Like you go to Amazon, you go to Google, you go to wherever you go to sites and you interact in a sort of flat way. You interact with pictures and text. If you think about real estate in the metaverse just could be a 3D representation of that space. Mm-hmm. So, why would somebody buy it? I mean, I wouldn't buy it. I'm not recommending anybody buy it. But if you ask me why somebody would, it's that imagine, metaphorically, you could set up a condo next to Google. That would be pretty valuable because there'd be a lot of people that are walking by, right? So just like in the physical world, you want your shop where people are. In the digital world, if the internet is rebuilt and there are these places that a lot of traffic aggregates, that becomes more valuable. So at least that's the theory.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. I know Sandbox and a lot of these, different metaverses that are out there, they just have so much land for sale, and it's all over the place where you see news articles all the time.
There are plenty of stories now about the kind of edge crazy stuff, and somebody that made $1 billion speculating on Dogecoin or Ethereum or Bitcoin. I just wouldn't get overly spun up about that stuff. It's kind of, you're always, when you get these big changes, you're always going to get, and the news will gravitate towards them because they are pretty funny and pretty fascinating. Some of these stories.
Right. It's so fascinating, everything that we're going through right now. And speaking of NFTs and cryptocurrency, how is the importance of organizations adopting cryptocurrency and NFTs into their organization? How does that look as companies begin to evolve in this way?
It's another area where I think experimentation and open-mindedness is a really good thing. NFTs this is really interesting. And before we spoke about the age divide, but let's use this as an example. So it's incredibly easy to say this NFT thing is nuts. Like, people are spending huge amounts of money for JPEGs on the internet. Like, why are they doing that? But if you pause for a second and think about it, I like art. I buy art. I have paintings that hang on my wall, and it makes me happy. I mean, I feel like it makes my house more beautiful. I walk into my house after a bad day, I can look at a painting that really speaks to me, and it makes my day a little bit brighter. Inherently, if I was an alien from outer space, I could come down and say, you spent money on like paint on canvas. Why did you do that? There's nothing inherently valuable about that. And that's true. It's worth something because it's worth something to me, and I don't really care what anybody else says. It matters because it has value to me. NFTs are art. There's a lot of good art. There's a lot of bad art, just like there is in the real world. And if somebody wants to spend money on a digital painting, then who's to say it's not worth that? So, with NFTs, I think there'll be an inevitable shaking out where a lot of it won't be worth what people spent on it. But I don't think that's the point. I think what you're witnessing is a generational change in the way people view art. And that's cool. And that's worth experimenting for sure. And there are companies doing really, really interesting things with NFTs right now. With crypto, similarly, I think that there's so much speculation. There's so many different coins that are being minted. There's so many crazy things that are happening. I wouldn't overly worry about that. I do think there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, in the sense that crypto does serve a need, in the sense of a secure digital global currency. Will that be Bitcoin, Ethereum? There'll probably be a few, but again, you don't have to have all the answers. What you have to do is not just turn yourself off to the whole thing, because something will emerge and you don't want to be late.
Right. I know, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but the Super Bowl commercial had a lot of like FOMO commercials on cryptocurrency, fear of missing out. And I know it can be really overwhelming, especially, for consumers and everyone out there with cryptocurrency and learning this. So how do we know which ones will be trustworthy? Is there something to look out for when you're looking at crypto, Bitcoin, Doge?
Yeah, I did not love all of that Super Bowl stuff, and it continues, because to me, it's not the point. The point isn't speculation. To me, those commercials were saying, oh, Bitcoin's going to go up and you don't want to miss out, so you better buy Bitcoin. I mean, that's just dumb in my mind. That's not, unless you have that money to burn, and instead of going to Las Vegas, you want to buy crypto, then go for it. But that to me isn't the point. The point is what sits under those cryptocurrencies is the rebuilding of the internet. The blockchain is incredibly interesting and powerful, and it allows all those cryptocurrencies to be formed and to grow. And so, to me, what would be a great thing to do is, first of all, just to learn about that. But, a few years ago, I started by buying a minimal amount just so I could learn, not because I was trying to make money, not because I hoped the price went up or down. I just wanted to learn, what is it like to have a wallet on the blockchain? What is it like to buy? How do you transfer real money to crypto money? How do you transfer it back? You learn a lot. And to me, you can do that for a de minimis amount of money. And I think that's worth it for everybody to do, just to learn about what's going on.
Right. And with cryptocurrency and NFTs and everything that is changing and updating and coming out, which, the metaverse has actually been around for a while. You look back, I mean, I'm dating myself, but when I was a kid, we had Sims, and that's a version of the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's just kind of adapting. Now, I do have another question with transitioning to 3.0. Do you feel like that we have a powerful enough grid in order to transfer from like the digital kind of www to the website to this immersive 3.0 web?
By grid, you mean power, or do you mean bandwidth, or?
Well, I think it's more like bandwidth. I've been reading a lot of articles where the 3.0 bandwidth and servers and things that we have right now won't support transforming everything to 3.0. So do you feel like that'll take years to develop, or is that something that's coming up soon?
It will take years to develop, just like it did last time. Some of the companies that did the best in the initial shift from Web 1 to Web 2 were the people that built the railroads, if you will, the Ciscos and the network companies. And that'll happen again. I think the rollout of 5G is a very important enabler of that. 5G really is quite important for so many technology, not just Web 3, but, you mentioned I'm on the General Motors board. We're working on autonomous vehicles. Eventually, 5G will be important for autonomy. It'll be important for genomics, for lots of things. But then there's back-end work that has to be done too. It doesn't have to be done all at once. It gets done as the applications develop, so too does the platform.
Okay. That makes complete sense. I've seen, news articles is the one thing that you have to take with a grain of salt at certain times and really do your homework and research, which is why I want to pick your brain about everything to do with upcoming technology. So it's so important. So thank you for answering so truthfully and honestly. I love how your communication and your style, your leadership style is impressive too. When you were saying earlier about just being your authentic self and, just talking as yourself and being your true self. So thank you again for just being that.
Well, thank you. That's nice.
So the technology field has always been male dominated. So what is the importance of striving for diversity in this field moving forward?
So this is an important and not an easy topic of conversation. It's something that I cared a lot about when I was in my leadership roles, and it's something I still care about. So first of all, obviously this is an issue in every industry, in society, but it happens to be a particular issue in the technology industry. If you just look at the data, technology is less diverse, not just for gender, but for every axis, than almost every other industry. And there are many, many reasons for that. It's not simple. It's very easy to say it's the pool of applicants, and there is some truth to that. So, one of the things that I care about in my charitable giving is education, and particularly STEM education, universally for K through 12, because part of why we're in the mess we're in is that there is not universal STEM education. And in particular, young girls don't get the STEM education, oftentimes that boys get. And that creates part of the feeder pool. And 20 years later, you just have more people, more boys that grew up to be people in the tech industry than you had young girls. That's a longer conversation. But the reason there's another reason that I think is important that I'd love to spend a moment on. Mm-hmm. And that is, do leaders genuinely, in their heart of hearts, believe that this is important for their business? I think the answer is mixed at best, and that is somewhat controversial. If you ask anyone, they will say, of course it's important for my business. It's critical for my business. I think some do and some don't. I think many believe it's important societally. Many believe it's the right thing to do. But if you really stripped away the layers and said, but is it going to make your business better? You'd get a mixed survey response. That's not right. And I think that that's the bridge we have to cross. The bridge we have to cross is that if leaders believed that they would have a better business tomorrow if they had a more diverse and inclusive workforce business, they would do it. Mm-hmm. Because, like many leaders are coin operated. It's money. And that's what capitalism does. It's not a bad thing, but because they believe it's running at a counter to potentially their business goals, they're kind of getting there, but it's like pulling through the mud. To me, I genuinely believed that it was important to run a great business. And there are three reasons to me, and it's very intuitive, it's not complicated. One, particularly for a consumer company, is you have to reflect your customers. You just have to have people making decisions in your organization that truly understand your customer base. And like, there's a great example from eBay that I can use, which goes years back. And that was the early days of e-commerce were very male dominated. Men shopped online, women did not in the early days. And that was the case, not just with eBay, but many others. And that's in large part because the items that were online were very functional. And men shop in a seek and destroy manner. They tend to know what they want, they search for it, and they buy it. It's been shown that women browse more, they explore more, they buy things that are not necessarily commodity items, like men did, especially early on. And the men that were leading didn't understand that. And they didn't understand, like, why do we have 75% men and 25% women online? And it actually took women leaders in the company to say, you have to change the site to actually bring in different types of customers. They don't know exactly what they're searching for. They may know a style, they may have an idea, they may have, there's a concept, but that doesn't work the way it works. And the site changed, and now the site is almost 50-50 in terms of men and women. So it really did take people to say, like, you can't, having 5 people that are white men sitting in a conference room in Palo Alto are not going to understand what every single one of your 200 million customers who look very different from you want. And that is super important. The second thing to me was about talent. And it was an issue when I was there. It's even more of an issue now. A lot of the constraint to companies growing is they can't get the right people. It seems so intuitive that if you create an environment where women, people of color, people from the LGBTQ community feel like they're welcome, you're going to get amazing people who might not want to join another company where they don't feel as welcome, but they want to join yours because they do. And it just seems that in a talent constrained world, to turn yourself off even a little bit to 50% of the population just seems pretty stupid to me.
Yeah.
You know, and the final thing that goes with that is that when somebody joins your company, you want them to be motivated. You want them to feel great about you and your company. You don't want them coming to work grudgingly. You want them so excited. You want them at the bar with their friends saying, I work at the greatest place in the world, and I'm fired up, and I come charging through the door every morning at 9 a.m. Part of that is building an environment around where people feel welcome, where they don't feel like, I'm the only Black employee here, so I have to sort of turn that part of myself off when I come to work. You're never going to get the best out of people for that. So again, like, to me, it's directly tied to building a great enterprise, is having that mindset of, no, this is about greatness. Like, inclusiveness is not a tax on what we're trying to do. It's an enabler of what we're trying to do.
I love that. And, of course, equality has grown, so much over, especially the last decade, but, even before that, of course, with, Martin Luther King and women's rights. But, everything has grown so much. What do you forecast as our biggest challenges in the tech field over the next decade with diversity and opening that world up to have it to be more diverse?
I mean, it's still hard because it's still not very diverse at the top. And the truth is that whoever you are, people tend to like people like them. I mean, that's just the real world, right? Is that I think even people that try to be open-minded and are curious about the world, they tend to favor things that they know. That's the way the human brain is wired. So we have made progress in tech, and we've made progress in industry generally. It's been slow. And one of the reasons it's slow is that, there's this cold start problem, which is when all your leaders look the same way, they tend to hire people under them that look the same way, and so on and so on and so on. So it just takes time. I am optimistic, though. It is changing. If you look at the numbers, it's moving in the right direction. There are more and more people that are not from the same background that are now leading major tech companies, which is very cool to see. Mm-hmm. There are more and more people, there are more, as one example, women serving on boards. There are more women CEOs. There are more women that are entering tech companies from the ground up, like engineering, which is terrific to see. So we'll get there.
Now, do you feel like that there's any advice that you have to overcome these challenges faster, like programs in school for youth that they're able? Because I know for me personally, I had home ec when I was in school, but I didn't go to a technology class, or, I didn't go to shop or woodworking or any of these other classes that my male peers were able to go. And, I know that they're trying to change this and trying to open it up. But do you feel like that if we had more of this change in schools for our youth that were, open to both sides of the gender, that would advance it a little bit faster?
Oh my God, it's so important. And by the way, it's not just important for diversity inclusion, it's important for the competitiveness of the United States. Mm. It's important for so much. I think. And, so I'm a big supporter of organizations like Code.org, Girls Who Code, whose mission is to teach basic computer literacy to kids. Mm-hmm. And I just think, it's not even about making every kid an engineer. That's not the point. Most will not be engineers. But you have to learn the way the digital world works to be an intelligent, functioning adult in the year 2030, right? I can't imagine, if you think about the education you get, there's still 45% of schools in the US that teach handwriting, but a fraction of that teach computer skills. Now, okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Not every single thing you learn in school is vocational, right? Like, you learn English, you're not going to become an English professor, but it makes you a rounded person. That has to be the case with basic computer literacy. And whether you then decide to be an artist or a poet or an engineer, it'll make you better for it. I learned to code. I'm not an engineer by training. I did not have a computer science degree. I had a political science and economics degree in school. But as I started growing my career, I decided on weekends to teach myself to code because I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to understand it. And, it's not like I was writing code that was on our site, but it made me more in touch with the people that were.
Yeah, that's so important to grow and to learn as much as possible. I actually do the same thing. I'm learning coding. I'm learning about the metaverse. I'm learning about crypto and NFTs, and I'm on Mintable, and learning and growing and adapting and evolving is the only way that we can move forward as humans, because it's going to keep changing and evolving and adapting. So it's so important. I feel like that's a resume, anything for people to put on their resume. Like, I am adaptive. That people should just hire you.
You know what? And I also it's my own bias, but I also think people that are wired that way are happier. And the ultimate point is not your career. The ultimate point is to be happy. To lead a happy and productive life. And if learning makes you happy, it will advance your career, but it doesn't have, if it makes you happy and fulfilled, do it just for that.
Yes.
Do it just for that.
Yes, for sure. And now, is there any other challenges that you foresee in the technology field over the next couple of decades that you're predicting today?
Well, there are plenty. I mean, I think that it's actually quite a challenging and difficult time right now for the tech industry, and particularly the internet part of the tech industry. First of all, there are regulatory issues and concerns. There are legitimate concerns about concentration of power. I suspect that we will see some action, antitrust action or otherwise, against some of these big companies. There are legitimate concerns about what's happening online. I think that's a much more complicated question, right? About misinformation. And, that's been a raging debate now for the last 3 or 4 years. And I think it's really, really challenging because in some ways this reflects society, right? It's not, the companies are not publishing misinformation. They're platforms in which people are spreading misinformation. So the question is it their role to be the arbiter of all of that? Is it their role to clean it all up? Again, that's a much longer conversation. But it's the existential challenge right now for social media companies. Privacy went from something nobody cared about to something everybody cares about. It's a very complicated world in the tech industry right now. Lots and lots of challenges.
Oh, yeah. I know that there's a lot of things that we have to overcome for sure in the next decade, and I can't wait to see it grow. And we do have some questions come in, so I'm going to ask you one last question before we start with a couple questions. What books do you recommend to your friends? And is there a book that you reread regularly?
Oh my God. This is going to sound weird, but first of all, I'm an exclusive nonfiction reader. Like, I read nonfiction, but no business books. I tend to read a lot this will just show you what an incredible nerd I am, but I love books about the universe, physics, and sort of what is actually going on out there. Mm-hmm. In one way, it blows my mind when you really learn about the way the universe works. In another way, it makes my problems seem small. Because when you have a really bad day and you think it's unbelievably existentially bad, when you realize the way the entire universe, the cosmos works, none of it really matters in the scheme of things. So I tend to read anything by an author named Brian Greene, who has written amazing story. You know, I'm not the advanced course, I'm the civilian, so I need it reduced to plain speak. But there's Brian Greene, Michael Dine. There's a Japanese physicist named Michio Kaku who wrote a book called The Future of Everything, which is, you know, a book that I'll read over and over and over again. I mean, just amazing works. And so I love that stuff because it's so mind-blowing. I also just read a book that I would recommend to everybody by about what's happening with cybersecurity. And it also was mind-blowing. It's fresh in my mind because I just read it by an author named Nicole Perloff. And the book is called, They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends. And I thought I knew a lot about what was going on in cybersecurity. I actually knew nothing, and it made me feel a lot worse about what's going on out there. But it's really mind-blowing book. So those are fresh in mind books that I've just read.
No, perfect. Well, thank you. I know that our listeners will go and do some research and search for those. And I know I will. I love anything to do with the universe. And you are so right. When we look at the grand scheme of everything that's out there, we are so small. And sometimes it's a great perspective to look at when you have such a huge, you know, issue or challenge in your life. And if you just kind of smile at it and say, you know what, it's okay, it's going to be okay,
Right.
and continue to keep going.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and get the start with a couple of questions. We have a couple of minutes. So the first one is, of course, we have a question about the metaverse. But what do you feel about if there are any dangers of the metaverse? I guess there is a lot of, you know, people that are still skeptical about it. And do you feel like there are any dangers?
Absolutely. You know, anytime you move part of your life online, there are dangers. There's dangers that you lose your privacy. There's dangers that you lose your security. Mm-hmm. There are dangers that you create concentration of power in ways that you don't want. I think it's totally okay to be curious and even optimistic, but not be a cheerleader. And by a cheerleader, I mean like, yeah, everything is great, rah, rah, it's all awesome. Everything's not awesome, but that still, you know, doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn and explore, because a lot of this stuff is absolutely happening and it will happen. So, you know, being appropriately skeptical is a good thing, but being too skeptical where you turn yourself off to it is probably not.
Right. So just a good balance of checks and balances of making of really of everything in your life, you know, not just new technology, but when you're doing research on houses or you're doing research on your new checking account, you always want to make sure you do research on it and getting the right thing for your life.
Sure.
The next question is, what are some opportunities that females can start taking advantage of now to put them in the position to enter the field if they didn't get those opportunities when they were young?
I mean, you know, it's interesting, but I don't think you're ever too old, if you will. I think implicit in the question was, well, I didn't do some things earlier on. Well, do them now. Whatever they are, you know. I think for technology, first of all, you should just learn. And again, like, you can learn to write code if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to do that. You can just study some of the things that we've been talking about on this call. And then one of the things that I would just recommend in terms of career is to be assertive and to take risks, you know, like people are busy and they tend to be self-interested. It's just the way the world works, right? Nobody is seeking you out wherever you are to pull you out of wherever you're in and give you a new life. It's just not realistic, right? But if you study and learn and then put yourself out there, good things tend to happen. And really, what bad is going to happen? The worst thing that can happen is you don't, it doesn't, you don't get exactly the opportunity you wanted to, and you're right where you were. So, again, my advice is sort of consistent in that it's just, you can't enter a new field unless you have a knowledge of that new field, and you can't enter a new opportunity unless you put yourself in a position to get that opportunity. So be courageous and go for it.
You heard it here. Be courageous and go for it. I feel like everything that you've been saying is just resonating with so many people. And we have just a second. I just wanted to say, is there any final advice or anything that you want to put out there for our listeners? If there's any advice that you would like to give them, any final thoughts?
Not really. I think, again, people tend to be very focused on their careers, and just the sense that you must be proactive in your career. You should not wake up in the morning thinking it is your company's job to advance you in the company. It happens to be that it probably is partly their job to create a space that you can advance. But if you come in expecting somebody to do that for you, you're already behind the 8 ball. I think you should view you as the CEO of your career. You should view you as the steward of your career. You should not be afraid to take a risk. You should not be afraid to learn things and explore things that might be outside of what your direct job is today. To me, some of the best leaders I've ever known were relentless in their own learning. And like that, again, nothing bad's going to happen if that's your approach.
Well said. Well, with that, I don't want to keep up too much of your time. We are coming to the end, but you have been great, Devin. Thank you so much for being here. I have personally learned so much, and I'm sure that our viewers have learned so much as well, and they'll take away all of this knowledge and put it towards not only their professional lives, but also their personal lives, and see where these technology advances will take them and where it will take us as a whole and as a society. So very well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being on here. Yes, thank you so much. And this concludes our monthly meeting. Let's continue to all support and learn from one another. Be safe, be kind to yourselves and others. And with that, the meeting is officially concluded. Thank you.